give
Yeah.
my other ID rights because I'm using my mobile
Okay.
for
Okay.
the
Okay.
video.
Just give me a moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Sure. Is it okay working?
Yeah, I think I'll be able to share the screen now.
You are based in Mumbai, Gina?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Good to know. So let's start the session. Hirani, sir, you can drop a message in the group for everyone to join in.
Okay, I'll get on. Right.
Okay. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Skilling on Saturdays. Our platform is very really blessed to have so many great speakers, trainers, coaches, and different experts from the industry. And today we have with us CA Jinal Maru, who is a chartered accountant, certified information system auditor, that we call it CISA, as well as DISA, and has 14 years of corporate experience. She has worked with Hindustan Unilever in the finance and supply chain functions. Jinal has audited information systems of clients as a part of risk advisory function in Deloitte, India. She's a speaker and trainer as well as a she's passionate about helping people become their very best version. So we welcome you, Zinal, with your short intro, and you can
Thank
go ahead.
you. Thank you so much, Ivani. And firstly, thank you for this platform. I'm really grateful for the time that you all are sharing. Everybody is participating. Thank you for your time, your attention, because that's really the key thing in today's world because there's so many things vying for our time and attention. So thank you. And
Right.
thank you for this platform, Shivani.
Yeah, most welcome.
So we'll dive straight into the session.
Yeah, you can start.
Okay. All right. So I have been a chartered accountant for now about, I think, 17 years now. Yeah. And as part of my work, because we used to analyze and test our client systems to see how they were being secured, how the information, the assets were being secured. So I developed an interest in cybersecurity and I did my DISA from the institute and CISA, like you've already mentioned. And I like to share what I learned because, and I learned this also from Rajkumar Aditya sir, that as you keep sharing, the learning becomes that much better. So that's why I'm here really. And what we'll do about how we'll structure our next 1 hour, we'll look at the reason why is it important to be cyber safe, what are the different kinds of cyber crime, and then we'll get straight into how we can be cyber safe. And we'll spend some time at the end taking questions from our friends who join. Now, why do we need to be cyber safe? Now, if you look at the statistics, and this is from Madam Kapu Nakate, who's the president of Bank of America, and she says that the digital economy, which is currently about 8% of India's GDP, is going to be 20% of our GDP by 2030. And that's just telling us directionally where it's going. The speed is just going to gallop because we know that over the last few years, especially COVID, technology has truly opened up our minds and we see it not just as an enabler of business, which it always was, but also an enabler of life. Because if you look at the range of activities we do online, not only do we look for information, we entertain ourselves online, we watch movies online, we shop online, we bank online. Our children are now studying online, we invest online. So there's just so much that we do online that if I were to think back about how my digital life started, I think way back in 99 when we got our first desktop and a mailbox, and in those days we had Orkut. I don't know how many people remember Orkut, but that was much, much earlier than we had any of today's social media platforms. But back in those days, if we didn't have a mailbox and if we didn't have Orkut for that matter, it's not like life stopped. We continue to have our regular life and the same set of opportunities. But if you look at life today, can you imagine life without your mailbox? Can you imagine life without a smartphone? Or for that matter, net banking, UPI. Look at the way we use UPI to make payments. It's pretty clear that life without the digital aspect is clearly unimaginable. And that's why we need to know the rules of the game. What happens is we take on technologies without really knowing what's the rules of the game, what's the way to operate so that we are safe. And that's really why it's important to be safe. Like I mentioned, the size of the digital economy, and the other aspect is cybercrime. And these are statistics from the National Crime Records Bureau. And they say that in the year 2022, cybercrime increased by 24% versus 2021. Now, that's huge. And again, it's only a sign of the times to come. In the years to go, it's only going to get that much worse. Because while we are going online, so are the criminals. And they are masters of human psychology. They may not necessarily be masters of technology, but they're masters of human psychology. And that's why it's important for us to understand how to be safe online. And so I'd like to just take a minute or two. If we could all, if we're convinced that we really could create a safe world, then let's make a strong intention. Let's just close our eyes for a minute, take a few deep breaths. And let's make a really strong intention. May we create a world that is safe for our children, our dear ones, and for us. When you feel ready, gently open your eyes. And with that strong intention, let's get into being cyber safe. So, if you look at the spread of cybercrime, it's very similar to the kind of crimes that you would see in the real world, or if I may say, the physical world. We have financial crimes, we have crimes on our reputation, emotional crimes, and even physical crimes. The difference being that all of them involve the use of technology, and that kind of 10x's the speed of the criminal and the impact that a criminal can make. So, for example, if you look at crimes of financial loss, we've all heard of those cases where our passwords have been compromised, our PIN has been leaked, and that's how maybe someone managed to debit or charge our credit cards or debit our bank accounts. Or there's also crimes of identity theft where people's identity documents like an Aadhaar card or a PAN card has been used to take out a loan in their names, and they don't even know until a bank comes calling saying, we've given this money to you and now it's time to pay up. So those are the kind of financial crimes that can happen with the help of technology. And if you look at crimes on reputation, well, there's a lot of identity theft and impersonation that happens. There are cases where fake
Gina,
profiles.
sorry to interrupt you. Please check, is your another mic also working? Because there is an echo.
Okay, just one second.
Yeah, it stopped.
I think that's because I also have my laptop on.
You can just mute if you are
Yeah,
speaking
I've done
from
that.
your mobile phone. Yeah.
Now is it better?
Yeah, it's okay now.
All right. So about we were talking about reputational crimes. So there are cases where people have fake profiles made for them, and those fake profiles are either used to ask people for money. That's happened recently to one of my contacts. Somebody made a fake Facebook profile of that person and approached their contacts to ask for money. There are deep fake videos, and we already know about a lot of celebrities who are facing this kind of harassment. Rashmika Mandana's case was the most recent. But there are cases where even regular people, not celebrities, but regular people like you and me, would also be subjected to these kind of crimes, because the kind of software that you need to make a reasonably good deep fake are pretty cheap. In fact, some are available even free online. So there are crimes of identity theft, fake profiles, or for that matter, even physical harm. So, for example, look at I think this is not moving to the next slide. Just 1 second, Shivani. I think there's some problem. The slides aren't quite moving ahead.
You can stop sharing and share again, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I believe you're able to see this slide now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, madam.
So what I have on the screen is a picture of an Apple AirTag, and this is commonly being used to stalk people. So, for example, the original intent of this small little gadget was that it could be tagged to things like car keys or things that we can misplace, so that we can locate them easily using the find feature in your connected iPhone. But it's being used to stalk people. So because it's so tiny, it's been noticed that young men end up slipping this in the purse of the girl whom they want to stalk, and then they get to know the location of that person without the person being aware that someone's stalking them. So this is a form of a physical crime that is being committed with the help of technology, or for that matter, even things like drones. And our Prime Minister Modi ji has said that India is going to be a drone hub by the year 2030, because they want the potential benefits of the drone technology. But the problem is that while a drone comes with no fly setting, so you have a setting where a drone is not allowed to fly over cities or residential areas. But the problem is that you can actually subvert these settings of a drone. So you have malwares. There's one example. The first one is maldrone. It's a software which can actually bypass these settings, and that allows the drone to fly over residential areas. And there's already been cases. There's been one case in Australia of a husband who was stalking his wife using a drone. So this is a form of technology enabling a physical crime like stalking. Or for that matter, this is an example of a deep fake video. It's how do we say, a slightly old example, but it's still relevant. Are you all able to hear this?
No.
Okay, I think I'm just going to have to mute.
No, Zeenal.
Okay, just 1 second. Apologies for that. Okay, let me know if
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look
Yes.
Can you hear this?
Yes, yes. Okay, yeah.
like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or how about this? Simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward.
Please talk to
Yeah, so the point I was trying to make is that this is really the deepfake technology. This is an example. Maybe we've already seen this or some other example. But the point is that this is the technology that's being used to impersonate people. And that was the one I was talking about, saying that the softwares are so cheap and so easily available that people are, even regular people like you and me, are also can now be targeted. Another example, and this is the metaverse. We're still trying to understand the metaverse, but the fact is the world is progressing so fast, and we already have crimes occurring in the metaverse. For example, now if I were to just explain the concept of the metaverse, think of it like fancy dress. When we were in school and we had, if say you chose to be a cat, or say you chose to be a tree, and you would dress up like that. Well, it's the same thing in the metaverse. You have a digital avatar, and that's what you use to participate in or enter the metaverse. But you need some gadgets. Just like, say, you go to watch a 3D movie and you are given 3D glasses to be able to watch that movie. Well, it's the same thing in the metaverse. You need a VR headset. You need something called a haptic glove, which is what I have a picture of up here. A haptic glove effectively has touch sensor. And that's what enables you to feel, touch, and touch things in the metaverse. For example, and people also have a haptic vest. People might even invest in an entire haptic body vest. So you can experience the space of the metaverse and do things in the metaverse. Now, the issue here is that, for example, if I'm wearing a haptic jacket, and I've taken on a digital avatar and I am in the metaverse, it's possible that another digital avatar of a user, say for example, they tap me on the shoulder. Now, I would actually experience that tap in my physical body because the touch controllers on the haptic vest would vibrate, right? And the other person, the touch controllers on their haptic glove would vibrate. So they would feel as if they're actually contacting my shoulder, and I would actually feel it as a tap on my shoulder. But the problem is that in the metaverse, things have got a lot worse than just a tap on the shoulder. And because this is an experience that a virtual body is having in the virtual world, laws of the real world are still evolving. We're still not able to figure out how to for these laws to apply. And in the process, criminals are becoming very brave because they know that nobody's going to go after them. And that's why children are experiencing the metaverse. Horizon Worlds is still not available in India. I mean, that's as far as I knew when I last checked. But that's the direction in which the world is going, which is why we need to understand these technologies before we engage and start using them. So now we talk about how do we stay cyber safe. Now, one thought process is that for a lot of people, and because we are from the community and we tend to read and stay updated, would be that we might focus on, okay, what's the latest method of the criminals, just so that we know and we are updated and we can be safe. But I don't advocate that approach simply because that means we are putting our focus and attention on things that we don't want in our life. So I would recommend instead a positive approach where we understand what is it that is our asset, and we use that and we use our time and effort to safeguard that. So for example, what are our assets? The first thing would be our children and our dear ones, because they are also online. So we want to make sure we know how best to use the technology to keep them safe. The second is money, our money, investments, our home, other assets that we have, a lot of smart devices that we use these days, and our information. And this could be financial information, personal information, medical information. Now, we want to definitely keep our assets safe. And how is it that these assets can be accessed, or how can our information about these assets and ourselves be shared? Well, the typical means would be our mailbox, our phones, social media accounts that we use, smart devices that we use. So we want to secure all of these. And that's what we will look at. So to start with, let's look at securing our money. Now, we have various channels that we use to access our money, which could be net banking, or could be a Google Pay, a Paytm, any other UPI app, debit cards, credit cards. So how do we secure them? Well, the first thing is banks today already have two-factor authentication enabled for their net banking access. But for us to truly reap the benefit, the first thing is for us to have a strong password. And though it's been said multiple times, it can't be overemphasized, because the password protects the access to any of these assets, whether it's a bank account, a demat account, or any other form of access. So it's important that we have strong passwords, that we change these passwords, and we don't recycle these passwords, which is to say that we don't have the same password for our bank account, for our demat account, for our mailbox. That's extremely important, because if this password gets leaked on any one platform, then the hacker is going to be able to use that password and try out all other accesses, which will all open up. So it's extremely important that we don't recycle our passwords. The other thing to bear in mind is that when it comes to access to our banks, we need to enable alerts. Alerts which would tell us that there was a transaction in our bank account, and we need to take these alerts seriously. For example, there was this one instance where one of my friends got an alert for a transaction of 7 rupees. And he was wondering, because 7 rupees was a very small amount, so it did not really, how may I say, cause alarm bells to ring. But the problem is that it's a sign, whether the amount be 7 rupees or whatever. Anyway, he thought he would attend to it later, and he was going for a lunch meeting. He finished that, and by the time he came out, he saw that on his phone there were messages for debits worth 85,000 rupees. So if he had just acted at the point in time when he saw that message for 7 rupees, and he had called the bank, or he had disabled his card, he would have been able to prevent all of these debits from happening. And he would have saved himself a lot of time and heartburn. So set up the alerts and take those alerts seriously. When you see them and you see something suspicious, take action. The other thing is, look at the transactions in your bank accounts on a frequent basis, and I would recommend a minimum, at least on a monthly basis. More frequent is better, but at least on a monthly basis, so that when you see the transactions, you know whether all of these transactions are legitimate and you are aware of them. So make sure that you do that. Another thing to keep in mind is that don't click on links when you want to access your bank's website. It would be a good idea to make a note of your bank's website and type it out in your browser window, because sometimes when we click on links, these links might take us to spoofed websites, and then we end up divulging our credentials like a password. And that's exactly how hackers get access to this information. So try and make a note of your bank website and type it out instead of clicking on links. Another simple thing to do is enable limits. So if you have limits on your net banking for various kinds of transactions like ATM withdrawals or online transactions, merchant transactions, international card usage, if you are not using it, please disable it, because that deters or prevents any international transactions from happening on your cards. You can enable when you need it, but for the time that you don't need it, and which is the larger chunk of time, disable these limits. Another thing you can do is simplify your, life by making sure that you only have the minimum bank accounts or cards. So don't have multiple debit cards and multiple credit cards because it's hard to keep track of all of these. So if you need like one credit card or one debit card, ideally from a financial freedom perspective, I would recommend no credit cards. But if you still choose to have one, make sure that it's limited to just one, because the more cards you have, the harder it is to manage and keep track of these things. When you start getting odd alerts, you need to spend some time figuring out which card it relates to. To simplify your life, shut and surrender unused cards. And yes, of course, so what RBI tells us, do not share your personal financial information, whether it be your password, your PIN, your OTP, CVV, card expiry. When you shred documents, make sure that when you destroy documents, make sure you shred them, tear them up, and ideally do these things at home. Because sometimes we tend to be traveling, we're in a hotel room, and we just chuck an ATM slip in the bin in the hotel room. But that's not a good practice. Remember to shred documents, and also remember to ideally do this kind of stuff at home, not in a location where someone else can get access to your trash and misuse it. And when you use the ATM, or make sure, or you swipe your card, make sure that you cover the keypad so that nobody can look over your shoulder and see what your PIN is. So those are some of the basic things that we can do from a good financial or money management perspective from a digital scenario. The next thing that we will talk about is about our mailboxes. And like I said, there was a point in time where getting an email was an event. Of course, things are no longer that way because we have a lot of emails that we receive. But it's important to secure our mailboxes. And the way we can do that, of course, have a password, and emails don't have two-factor authentication by default. Our bank accounts do, but our mailboxes don't. So please ensure that you enable two-factor authentication for your mailbox. And the thing to remember is that our mailbox comes with a certain storage limit, and we end up using it more as a storage box rather than just as a place to send and receive emails. And this is where we increase our risk. Because if you think about it, what is sitting in your mailbox? Well, there's a host of information. We'll have our bank statement, we'll have our credit card statements, we'll have our medical reports, we'll have our credit scores. There'll be so much important communication and emails, DMAT account statements, NPS account statements. Just think about it. There's so much information. So instead of keeping all those mails, and it's only when we get a limit from our mail provider that you're approaching the storage quota limit of your mailbox, that we tend to start, okay, now I need to delete because otherwise I'll stop receiving emails. Now, that's not the right approach. Ideally, what you want to do is when you get an email, go through it. If you think that the attachment is relevant for future reference, download that attachment, save it on your hard disk, on your laptop, and delete that email. Keep a clean mailbox, because if your mailbox is clean, even if someone were to hack into it, they're not going to get any information. And that's how we play on our side. So it's extremely important to make sure, and I would recommend that spend some time this weekend to clean up your mailbox. Don't keep important information there, because that way we are helping hackers to defraud us. So let's not do that. Keep a clean mailbox. Another thing you want to keep in mind is when you are using your mail or accessing your mail on a common computer, this could be in a cyber cafe, it could be, say, maybe you accidentally, for some reason, need to access your mailbox and you don't have your device access. And say maybe you use the hotel computer or someone else's computer to access it. The two things you need to remember is that you use incognito mode when you're browsing on a common computer or a computer that belongs to someone else, because that way they can't see your browsing history. The other thing is you want to disable the remember me or remember my password checkbox. Because if you don't do that, the next time that person can open up your mailbox because your password got saved the last time you logged in. So remember these two things if you ever end up using a common computer or a computer in a cyber cafe or in a hotel or anything of the sort. And it's best if we do these things as a practice. Remember to uncheck the remember password option even when you're working at home, because you're not going to suddenly remember to do it when you're using it in a cyber cafe. So form that habit now and do it every time you access it, even on your home computer. And another thing to remember and form a habit is to use the logout button. We tend not to log out, we just shut the browser window. And that enables a lot of different kinds of attacks because effectively the session is still on. So I'm using a technical word here, but the session or the connection to that mailbox is still on. So unless you log out, just shutting the browser window doesn't shut that session. And that's where a hacker who has access or has malware installed in your machine will be able to access your mailbox. So make sure that you remember to uncheck the remember password button and remember to log out of any access, whether it's a mailbox, whether it's net banking or your social media account, whether it's Facebook or WhatsApp web, any of those. Just remember to always log out. So that's really from the standpoint of securing our emails. One important aspect is that please remember never ever to open emails from unknown senders. We do tend to get emails where the sender name is not somebody we know. It's not even an email we expect. So, for example, if you haven't ordered any product and you get an email saying your product is on the way, well, that's a suspect email because if you haven't ordered anything, and then why is something on the way? So we tend to get excited to see, oh, okay, what is it that's on the way? And that's really what the criminals are hoping and banking on. So don't open emails that are from senders whom you don't know. If you accidentally end up opening an email, please definitely don't click on any links in those emails and don't download any attachments because that's how viruses enter our devices. So that's about our mailboxes. Now we will talk about our phones. And while this is a nice joke, the fact is that we do end up living out of our phones. And it's extremely important that we secure our phones. So if you think from a phone security standpoint, the physical security, the physical custody of our phones is extremely important. So please make sure that your phone is always within your physical control. Don't forget it, because if you forget it around and you have, especially if you haven't protected it with something like a biometric, because sometimes you might be putting in your PIN and someone has been looking over your shoulder and has managed to see that PIN. They're just waiting for an opportunity for you to leave your phone unattended for some time and then they can access it. So make sure that you keep your phone protected with ideally a biometric or a PIN and keep it with you at all times. In terms of enabling settings on your phone, make sure that you're using a phone antivirus. You have a lot of good antivirus softwares which are available at a very reasonable price, because today a lot of us are doing banking transactions on the phone. So it's a good investment. Think of it as an investment. Invest in a phone antivirus. And what you want to remember is that with regard to a phone, make sure that you have location services disabled when you're not using them, because otherwise a lot of information is getting shared about where you are and what is it that you're doing. Another thing is enable permissions on your phone such that your phone asks you for permission to download an app. Because if that's not set, then malwares or apps which are of malified intent can get downloaded without your knowledge. And when you choose to download an app, make sure you are always downloading it from your app store, because apps in the app store are verified. So make sure that you only download apps from an app store. Don't click on links that people send you to download apps. And when you download an app, make sure that you look at things like how many are the number of downloads. Because if it's an app with just very few downloads, you know that this is a suspect app. It's a fishy app. So make sure that you check the number of downloads, check what are the reviews about that app, and definitely check what are the permissions that the app is going to require. And see whether that makes sense, keeping in mind the functionality of the app. For example, if it's an app to take notes and if it wants access to your microphone, you need to think, why would a note-taking app need access to your microphone? Is it allowing you to talk into the phone and then it's taking notes? Well, then it might make sense. But if that's not the functionality, then you don't want to download that kind of an app. So be very careful when you download apps, because that's one of the simplest ways for viruses to enter your phone. And delete apps that you don't use. There could be messenger apps which you may have downloaded but which you no longer use. So it's the same concept. Simplify your life. If you're not using an app, you haven't used it in a few months, in a year, then there's probably no need to have that app. It of course would keep you secure, but would also help your phone's life to extend. And remember to shut down your devices. A lot of us are not in the habit of shutting down our phones or shutting down our laptops when we are not using it. But that's extremely important, because that reduces our exposure in terms of malified activity happening, because the phone is no longer on the network or the device is no longer connected for anybody to access it. So that's about our phones. Now we talk about our social media, and this is a big part of our lives today. But it's extremely important, and a lot of us end up sharing a lot of pictures of ourselves, our family, even our children. So it's extremely important that we don't share pictures of our children without their permission. And yes, children are entitled to privacy. So without our children's permission, we are not allowed to share their pictures online. That's from their rights standpoint, but also from a security standpoint, because sometimes we just don't realize how we are giving out information. Just take an example. Say, for example, you shared a picture of your child in their school uniform, and it was some activity. Maybe it was some parade or sports day in their school, and that's how you ended up sharing that photograph. But think from the standpoint of a person who is looking to defraud you. The minute you share that kind of picture, what they get to know is that this is your child. From the school uniform, they know this is this likely school the child is going to. And they would also know the approximate area in which you stay, because most people send their children to schools which are close by to their homes. So you are, without realizing it, you are sharing a lot of information about yourself, your child, and that could endanger your child's security. So please, this is a request to all parents. Please do not share pictures of your children online. And even if you must share it, please share it with a closed group. Do not make these public shares. When I say public shares, in social media, you could have a public profile or you could have a private profile. Now, it's quite common with youngsters these days, but maybe because when we started sharing stuff, we weren't really that aware. Youngsters today are a lot more aware. But what they do is they have two profiles. One is a private profile, and here it could be as a simple example, like maybe an Instagram or even a Facebook account. They have two accounts. One is a private profile where they share their real photograph, their real name, and everything, all the information about them is real. But here, the people whom they connect with or the people who are on their friend list are people whom they know from the real world, people whom they know in person, could be friends from the building, could be friends from school and relatives and so on. But in a public profile, people do not share their real name, they do not put their real photograph, and they don't share any of their real information, because this is a profile that they use to interact with strangers. Now, it's possible to have this kind of clear compartmentalization, and that's a good idea, especially if you choose to interact with strangers. Ideally, you don't want to do that, but if you still choose to, then this is the way to do it. What we end up doing is that we might accept a friend request from someone whom we don't know in the real world. Now, just think about it. Would you allow a stranger to come into your house? Would you? Would you allow a stranger to? Would you just open the door and allow a stranger to come into your house? I mean, all likelihood we wouldn't, right? So why would he do that in our online space? And that's exactly what we do when we accept a friend request from a complete stranger. Because the minute that stranger becomes a friend on your friend list, they can see pictures of your children that you're sharing. And that's really how information goes out. So please go back and revisit your friend list. And that's a serious request. I urge you to do that. If you have strangers on your friend list, on your social media profiles, please consider unfriending them, because the right thing to do is to only have friends from the real world on your friend list. And if you want to interact with strangers, make a public profile and don't post your real photographs, your real name, anything about your real life on that public profile. So that's one of the rules of engagement on social media platforms. Another thing we might want to keep in mind is I've mentioned about, and this is more for the children in our families. As parents, we want to make sure that they know how to operate safe and secure. So if your child is using the computer to connect online for studies or any such thing, it's a recommendation have an antivirus with parental controls where you can see what is their browsing and what are the websites they're going to. And it might be a good idea to also keep the devices in a place in the house where a lot of people in the house are going about. So your child knows that someone or the other in the family is going to be overseeing what they're doing. And the more important thing, more than technology, is have an open communication channel with your child so that your child knows that if there's anything wrong, I can go to mommy, I can go to daddy, and they'll help me out. It's extremely important to have that clarity and that communication with your child, because if something goes wrong, if something happens, if maybe somebody is bullying them at school, or maybe there's somebody they've befriended online who's now harassing them, they need to have the confidence to come and talk to you, that you will believe them, you will trust them, and you will help them. And this is a non-technology solution, but it's the most important solution. So I would recommend that we work on our relationships and make sure that we've got that sorted. That's from a social media standpoint. This is an example of what we see typically on any websites that we might log into. And we might choose the sign in with a Google or a Facebook option. But this is not recommended simply because then anybody who hacks into your Google account will have access to all the websites that you've accessed using Google. So I would recommend you don't do that. You could ideally have a throwaway email address that you use for all kinds of secondary logins, or you could use a password manager. And if you don't want a password manager, you can just have an Excel file that you use to store your passwords, but protect that Excel file with a master password, which of course then you will have to remember. Another thing is from the perspective of securing our smart devices. A lot of us have smart speakers, the Google smart home devices at home. So make sure you check the privacy settings on these devices, because a lot of them have settings to record conversations and store these recordings, or they remain on even when they're not in use and they're constantly listening into what's happening in your home. So you might want to check the privacy settings and make sure that you're happy with those settings. You could set the recordings to delete or to delete always. So those are some settings you can look at and update. This is an example from what Mark Zuckerberg does, and I'll just show you a close-up of this. So what he does, and this is what even the FBI director James Comey used to do, he puts a tape on the camera of his laptop. And this effectively prevents a webcam hijack. So when you are not using the camera on your laptop, you might want to cover it with tape. You can take the tape off whenever you need to connect it, for example, for a Zoom call, like when you're sharing your video. But when your camera is not in use, keep it covered with that tape. You get these kind of tapes online as well. This prevents a webcam hijack. So effectively what happens is, for example, one way it works is if you click on an attachment in an email which was suspicious, you might not have realized it, but it may have downloaded an attachment. And that allows the hacker to remotely access your device and control your camera. And they can activate your camera without that white light beside your camera getting switched on. That's called stealth mode. And so you wouldn't even know that your camera is on and somebody is using that camera to observe you and what's going on in your house. Which is why you might want to consider covering the camera in your laptop with this tape. Now we've looked at technological solutions, and what I'm talking about now, it's a non-technology solution, but it's an extremely important solution. And this calls for the same discretion in our digital lives as we do in our real lives. And this concept is a concept from psychology. And what it says is that we tend to distrust strangers completely, but we have complete trust on our immediate family and our best friends. Well, it's the same concept. You tend to trust your close ones the most, but strangers the least. But what we end up doing in our online space, which we spoke about, is that we end up accepting friend requests from people who are complete strangers. And they end up in our inner circle. They get access to everything that's online in our circle for sharing with family and friends. So please, like I've already said, revisit your friend list, clean it up, make sure you unfriend people who are strangers. Don't think about whether they'll feel bad. You need to think about how you will be safe. And you need to do this for yourself and for your dear ones. The other aspect is about controlling our behavior. And this is the other non-technology solution, but again, an extremely important solution. Criminals, cyber criminals, are effectively using our emotions. As humans, we are creatures driven by emotions. It could be emotions of fear, it could be emotions of greed, it could be emotions of love. So, for example, an example of an emotion of greed is when somebody sends us an email saying you won a prize, and we immediately open that email to see what is the prize that I've won. And that's how a cyber criminal can get a virus into our system. Or, for example, an emotion of fear. For example, we might get an SMS saying your electricity bill is unpaid, and if you don't click on this link and pay the money, then your connection will be severed. And we immediately get worried because obviously we don't want the electricity in our house to get disconnected. So we immediately click on that link, go to that page, which is a spoof page, and we end up sharing our ID password. And that's how the criminal exploits the emotion of fear or even the emotion of love. There are cases where people get calls from someone pretending to be their dear and dear ones and asking for money. And people get worried because, oh my God, my child is calling me. Oh my God, my father is calling me and he needs money. I must transfer the money. But we don't realize that these are deepfake audios, deepfake videos that are being used to exploit our emotion of love to get money out of us. So the first thing and the most important thing rather that I would say is that we need to be in control of our emotions. Ideally, when you get this kind of a call, what you want to do is you want to hang up that call. You want to take a deep breath and then you want to call the person back. I don't mean call that same number back. I mean, for example, if you thought it was a call from your father, you have a number that's saved as your father's number. You want to call that number, not the number that you just got a call from. And you want to confirm with your father if it was him who called a few minutes back with a request for whatever. Maybe it was a request for money or a request for anything else. But that's really how you calm down. The important part is to be in control of our emotions, our behavior. And that's what I mean the most important non-technological solution. And finally, we'll talk about what do you do if you are actually attacked. All of this, what we spoke about right now, was prevention, and prevention is the best form of protection. But ideally, if you are attacked in any way, then what do you do? Well, the first thing you do is you limit your damage. And how do you limit your damage? So, for example, if your card was compromised, call up the bank and block the card so that no further damage can happen. If somebody hacked into your mailbox, what you want to do is you want to contact the mail service provider. Try and change the password, but if that person still has access, they'll be able to see the password that you've changed. So what you want to do is instead of changing your password, you might want to contact the mail service provider and block your account temporarily. You could do that for your net banking accounts as well if you feel they're compromised. So the first thing you want to do is limit the damage. The second thing you want to do is save the evidence. So if, for example, you've got any SMS or you've got any email, you've got any photographs, any videos, and this might happen in cases where fake profiles have been created for people. You want to save the web page URL. So you want to save every piece of evidence because that's what the cyber police will need to be able to help you. The next thing you want to do is you want to report the crime, and you can use the 1930 helpline to report the crime. Or you can go to this website, which is our government's website, to report a cybercrime. Of course, after that, you need to go to a cybercrime police station and convert this complaint into an FIR. Whatever you do, remember, never ever pay ransom, because that's not going to make the criminal go away. That's just going to make them more bold. So don't pay the ransom that any hacker demands to release your information, or if they created a fake profile to stop harassing you. Don't ever pay the ransom. And finally, reboot. You need to forgive yourself. Say, for example, the first thing you want to do is forgive yourself. You're human. You made a mistake. It's okay. That's not the end of your life. But you want to reboot, which is you want to learn from your mistake and you want to make sure that you don't ever let something like this happen again. It's a mindset change, forgiving yourself and then making the change, forming good habits so that you're safe online. So that's really what I had from my end to share. And we can now take questions. So anybody who has a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you. It was really wonderful learnings, and just a reminder, some of the things that we need to be careful while sharing any information digitally. So thank you once again for all the information shared. The floor is open for participants to ask questions.
So I can see one comment from Manjeet, and Manjeet, you're absolutely right. When you go to a website, you want to make sure that you check that it's an HTTPS website. There's also the padlock sign on the extreme left. So you want to make sure that it's a secure website before you start transacting. Typically, for example, if you're buying stuff online, or for that matter, as a good practice, it's Manjeet has absolutely spot on. Make sure you're always on an HTTPS website. Yeah. So anybody who has a question?
Yeah. Okay, so there are a lot of praise for you.
I can see Manjeet's hand up. So I'm not sure. Is there a way?
Yeah, you can speak, Manjeet.
Yeah. I have a question. Yeah, you said that we should keep our mails clean.
Yes.
So like there are huge number of mails, and we it's very difficult to manage it. So like any tool, or like how we can manage in Gmail or Yahoo. So
So Manjeet, I'm just trying to understand your question. Are you saying it's difficult to manage because right now there are so many emails? Because that's going to be a one-time cleanup that you have to do. Think of it as Diwali cleaning. Just think that you one time you need to make up your.
Is like as per my understanding, his question is like when we create so many emails, it's difficult to manage all the passwords and remember all the mails and check.
no, actually
So
my
any
question
email
is
management software.
my question is, Shivani, my question is like, means as she said that we have to keep our mail clean. So like we have many junk mails, many means important mails with attachment which we have sent. And so my question is how we can manage that mailbox so that it will remain always clean. And for example, I have 15 GB of data, means space, and I have, means it is already full.
Okay. So, Manjeet, see, if you look at the oldest emails in your mailbox, and I can tell you this because when I first came across this tip, even I was wondering, how do I implement this? But when you go back and look at your mailbox, if you see some of the oldest emails, I mean, I can tell you my experience. When I started, I had mails from 10 years back. Yeah, because we have this feeling that we want to keep everything. Kya pata kab kya kaam aa jaye. But the point is, if you think something's important, download that attachment. We need to have a system on our own laptops where we have a way of storing these. So, for example, if it could be bank statements, you might want to keep them on keep a year-wise folder and just keep downloading your bank statements year-wise into those folders and then delete all of those. Say, for example, it's DMAT statements. Yeah, those are important. So, what you do is make sure you download all your DMAT statements into a year-wise folder. So, you have a monthly email, 12 emails for 12 months of the year wise. So 1920, 2021, 22, 22, and 23, and so on. And then just go and delete all those emails. What you need to do is you'll have to find a way to organize and see, ideally, a tool is supposed to help you, I agree. But the point is that nowadays we've started depending too much on tools. This doesn't really require a tool. All you need to do is think about how is this information going to be useful to you and how do you want to organize it. If something can be organized year-wise, do it that way. Download the attachments and keep it in your hard disk. But delete the email, because the fact is, if you need a certain email, you don't want to keep looking at, say, maybe 1500 emails, because locating one email out of 1500 emails is also a waste of time and a very difficult activity. So just think about what is important and just keep that. The rest of the stuff, trust me, we tend to keep all this information, but we never really go back and look at it. I'm not telling you to just go and do a control all and delete, but think about it. Don't do it in a rush. You might spend some time, maybe spend an hour or two every weekend, and take a target that maybe in the next 3 months, I will clean up my mailbox. And then once you've cleaned it up, keep it clean, because by then you will have figured out an organizing method, what kind of emails you get, what's important, where do you want to save it, and the rest of it you can just read and then delete. You might have some mails, like you said, some sent emails that you keep, which are important, say, especially from a work standpoint. So if you're doing your work using these kind of mailboxes, then you might want to keep some mail trails for future reference. And I get where you're coming from. But then in that case, I would recommend that you go for a secure mail. There are paid mail softwares that are available, and they promise you a complete encryption end to end. Those are safe mailboxes that you want to use, especially from a business standpoint, if you want to keep some conversation trails. But if you're using a free mailbox, you really can't be keeping your stuff there, because there's only that much security that you can get with a free mailbox. Manjeet, I don't know if I've answered your question. I don't know if there's anything.
You definitely answered it very intelligently, and thank you so much for answer.
Welcome. I can see Varun's hand up. So Varun, you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Jinal ma'am, for the insightful session. I had a question regarding VPN. So you mentioned about antivirus correctly.
Yes.
So how much of a VPN can be useful for an individual? Because enterprise, they do have it because they use for bulk users. But for an
Yes.
individual, can we use VPN, and is it feasible, or is it good to use VPN for laptop and devices?
Varun, I have not personally used a VPN, so I can't really tell you from personal experience. But yes, it is one of the recommended practices. What I can do is I can figure out exactly how it works for an individual and what the benefits are, and I can come back to Shivani, and maybe then she can share it on the group if that helps.
Sure,
I would,
sure, no
if
problem.
you allow, I would add on it.
Somebody speaking, I'm not sure who.
Yeah, I'm Manjeet here. So
Yeah.
if you allow, I can answer this question.
Yeah, sure, please do.
Yeah, so VPN is the most secure form of connection. So because everything is tracked there, so it's always better if you have VPN. From some like, for example, I have my company laptop, so they provide that they have software always, means antivirus updated, and they have that VPN also to connect to some particularly client network. So why it provides another layer of security to us. So if we are using, but we should not use this public Wi-Fi or VPN. So we should always use that private network which we can trust.
So thanks, Manjeet. I completely agree with Manjeet that ideally we shouldn't use free public Wi-Fi. But specifically about VPN, about how it works for individuals, the benefit that we can get, and how do we go about using a VPN as on our individual devices. I believe that was your question, Varun. So
Yeah.
Manjeet is right. It's a good idea, and I know that it's one of the recommended best practices, but I haven't personally used it, and I don't really know what's a good VPN for an individual to use. So let me just check about that and come back.
Sure, no problem.
I see Mahesh's hand up. Mahesh, you have a question.
Jinal, many gratitudes for sharing valuable content.
Thank you.
To secure our property. Okay, yes. So
Yeah.
my question is, we connect a credit card in multiple places. Is there any way to check where it is connected and we can remove if we think this is temporary?
So by connected, are you saying you've set up like an auto mandate? Is that what you're talking about?
Say example, to buy any say online things, we use say credit cards.
Yes.
Okay, so let it be InstaMojo, Razorpay, or this company, that company. So
Sure.
can we see maybe in our bank account or somewhere where it is connected?
So Mahesh, I'm just trying to understand when you mean connected, because in your bank statement, in your credit card statement, you will get all the information of the swipes. So there is then the concept of mandates where you can set up recurring payments. So are you talking about recurring payments or are you talking about one-time swipes?
Connecting one time, are they able to say again pull the money from account?
So ideally, domestic transactions, I don't think that's possible. International transactions, it is possible because they do get your card details. And in international transactions, they don't even need an OTP. So for
Correct.
international transactions, they would be able to charge your card again, which is why I mentioned that disable your international usage when it's not in use. When you intend to use it, you can just go, it just takes a second. You can go activate your international usage, swipe your card, and once you're done, immediately again disable it. Because for international transactions, they don't need an OTP. Once they get your card details, they can charge it again. But when it comes to domestic transactions, you will need to authenticate with an OTP. So they can't be see, unless they get access to your credentials. If they can see, because your OTP goes to your mailbox, and if they can see your mailbox, then they'll get your OTP and then they can purchase using your card. But if you have, if your mailbox is secure and they can't see the second factor authentication, then they can't really, the company can't directly charge it. Cyber criminal can, because then they are accessing your credentials. Right?
Yeah, I'm clear.
All
Gratitude.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if there are any questions in the chat. There are quite a few messages. Okay, Manjeet, your question is that the same as Mahesh's question? Because you've asked how to check where we have registered our credit. Okay, it's for Mahesh's question. All right.
I want to ask you one thing.
Yeah, sure. Who's this?
Bhavin.
Yeah, Bhavin, tell me. I can't
You
see,
said,
but I can hear you.
yeah, so sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Tell me.
You said something regarding the Aadhaar card where we have, given, maybe we would have given it somewhere and people might have used it as a for loans or something. You said like this.
Yes.
So, is there any way to find it? Like, this is possible that would have given many times our Aadhaar card everywhere.
See, ideally, it's not really the individual's fault because the bank is supposed to do an in-person verification. But the problem is a lot of banks are also bending the rules, and they just go basis document, which is why these kind of things can happen. But one thing that we can do as individuals is make sure that you look at your credit scores. So there are our credit score reports which are available to us. And when we download those, we get details of outstanding loans, credit cards in our names. So it might be a good idea to look at your credit score. If ideally once a year is like the absolute bare minimum, but if you can look at it at least once a quarter, because then that way you know that nobody's taken out a loan in your name that you're not aware of. But that's more of a detective kind of control, to use auditor language. If you think from a prevention standpoint, ideally when you give your documents, and this is a very simple, solution. When you give your documents, say a Xerox copy of your Aadhaar card or a PAN card, always write the use on the top, like very, very close to where the image of the PAN card starts. On the top, make sure you write for the purpose of whatever. It could be, say, for the purpose of an account opening, or the purpose of account closing, or for the purpose of KYC of the Bank of India or HDFC Bank, whatever it is. Because then it's that much more difficult to use that same document, because the purpose is written on the top. So if I have written the purpose as for the purpose of KYC of, say, HDFC Bank, the cyber criminal will not be able to give that document to any bank other than HDFC Bank, right? So you're kind of reducing the possibility of misuse, and make sure that when you write the usage on the top, a little bit of the text comes onto the document. Because if you keep it right on top, then they can just cut it and take a Xerox again and eliminate it. So make sure that a part of the purpose that you have written goes onto the body of the document itself. Not like the PAN number itself, but like you have a lot of empty space around the PAN card. So make sure that a part of the purpose gets written there. So then they can't really cut it and misuse the document. So that's like a very simple preventive solution. It's a solution I heard about quite a few years back. And when I heard it, I started doing it. And these are all a matter of habit. We need to make this a habit, because you can't remember to do it on one fine morning. Make it now a habit that whenever you give any of your photocopy documents, you always give it to the purpose written on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome. I'll just check if there's any other question. I can see, Manjeet, is that a question or a comment? I think it's a comment, because I don't really see a question. You're talking about ICICI Bank giving virtual cards. Thousands of emails we need to unsubscribe. So yeah, Deepika, you have a question about a lot of emails. Yeah, see, the reason is that our email IDs do get stolen, and unfortunately, there's really no solution other than unsubscribing one by one. And I know it might seem like a bit of an effort, but then it helps, because then there's a lot of crap that stops coming to your mailbox. And yeah, I can see a question, or it's a comment from Lo Tamra. And yeah, so your spam mail, the purpose is that it's meant for spam. So the mail provider is helping you identify it. So you don't really need to take the trouble to go and empty your spam folders, because those get auto deleted in almost all mailboxes. And meaning by a certain aging or size. So if there's a certain limit and the spam exceeds that, the mail provider deletes it. So you don't need to worry about that. Yeah, there's a comment from Gaurav. Yes, if you get a call without the number showing, it may be a fraud call. Please don't receive those calls. In fact, sometime back there was quite a racket that those kind of calls had created. Yeah, private number, and there's no number that's visible. So please don't take those kind of calls. And yeah, and I think I can see a question from Prithvi. So the question is, how do you remember so many passwords? It's a very valid question, and it's a question I get almost in every session. And the thing is that there is a concept of a password manager, which is a tool that you can use to store your passwords, and it autofills your passwords. And you can use that instead of having to remember so many passwords, or for that matter, instead of using like a Google or a Facebook login to sign in, because that's not a good idea. So you could use a password manager tool. Another solution, and this is again an Indian solution, if I may say, have an Excel file where you can store all these passwords, but protect that Excel file with a master password. And this is a password that you must remember. You can't write this down anywhere. And don't ever recycle this password. Don't use this password across other accesses, because then you're opening yourself to possible attacks. So you could use a password manager software. There are a lot of good password manager softwares available. Yes, but please do not use Google Password Manager, because that's also Google doesn't specify what is the encryption algorithm that they're using, and that is available only on Chrome. So if you want to use another browser like DuckDuckGo or Tor, then you can't really use Google Password Manager. So don't tie yourself into Google Password Manager. Either invest in one or have an Excel file where you make a note of these. Autofill will not work. You'll have to open the Excel file, look at the password and type it in, but that can be one alternate solution. So I'm not sure if there's any other question. What to set as security questions?
The questions are not coming. So
yeah, so Atul has a question about what to set as a security question.
there is a lot of praise for your session.
Thank you,
Prithvi.
Shivani. So,
Yeah.
Atul, your question about what to set as a security question. So, you have a lot of options that typically the provider of that access would give you. So, you can choose from there. Some also give you the option of setting your own security question. And I can't really recommend an option here. It's got to be something that's known. But the point to remember is that it's something that's information that only you know and is not easily guessed. So you can use that as a guideline to decide what's your security question. People have a lot of things like, what's your mother's maiden name and what's the name of your first school, what's the name of your first pet. But whatever it is that you decide to set as this question, the guideline to go by is that it's something that's information that only you or your absolute immediate family would know. This is not something that you've been telling strangers, so they are not going to be able to guess this. Right? So you want to keep that in mind when you select it for security question. So Shivani, I think I've addressed the questions in the chat. Yes, Atul, yeah, the answer should not be obvious and not known to others.
Yeah, definitely.
Madam, there is an app
Thank you,
by
Jina.
which
It was really wonderful insights. Yeah, who was that? You can go ahead.
Yeah, there's an app by which you can secure your Aadhaar number. So is it safe enough? Do you have any idea about it? Yeah.
What app is this? I'm not sure, but see, ideally there are a lot of apps in the market. What you need to do is before you use any app, make sure one that you're downloading it through your app store. And before you download it, just go take a look at what are the number of downloads. So typically with an app which is not very frequently used, then you might not want to get that app because then one, it's possibly a fraudulent app, and the other thing is that it's the developer may not be interested in keeping the app secure. There are all kinds of vulnerabilities that are being discovered with apps every day, and the developer has to be someone who's invested in keeping the app secure. So if it's not an app with a good developer with a reasonable number of downloads, you can look at the ratings and the reviews of the app before you decide to go for it. So I can't specifically tell you about a specific app, but keep that in mind for any app you decide to use. Keep these guidelines in mind. Also look at what kind of permissions the app is taking. It might tell you that they're securing your Aadhaar, but if they are going to take access to, say, maybe your contacts, or ideally an app that secures your contacts, Aadhaar doesn't need access to your contacts. But if those are some of the permissions that the app requires, then that's just a way to latch on to your data. So it might seem like a good use case, but use these filters to decide whether this is an app that really serves your purpose.
Okay, thank you so
There
much.
is an option. Yeah, there is an option in Gmail also to go and like we can check what all permissions we have given to third-party apps, and then we can eliminate those connections. So
Absolutely.
I think we all need to be invest some time in these kind of things and securing ourselves.
Very true, very true.
Yeah, so we usually don't do, we just get busy with other things, but this is a really serious thing that we need to work on.
Very true.
Thank you, Gina, for all the wonderful insights and sharing, and as well as reminders for us to take these things. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Shivani.
it's not.
For the
It's
platform.
it's not required, Guru Naji. AI companion. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, everybody
Joining
who's
in today.
participated.
Yeah.
And thank you, Shivani, for this platform. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
See you. Bye. Happy weekend.
Bye. Happy weekend.